everyone, Editing Ellie here. I just wanted to give you a trigger warning for dubious consent, and that is going to be from the 32-minute mark to 40 minutes 40 seconds. So if you don't want to listen to that, please feel free to skip that section.
Welcome back to the Sapphic Gays Podcast. I am your host, Nisa, and with me, as always, is my co-host and partner, but not in a gay way, Ellie.
And we keep that intro every episode.
That is the official intro now. Partner, but not in a gay way.
I meant what I said the other day. I do want it on a sweatshirt.
Oh yeah, definitely. It has to be on a sweatshirt.
Yeah, when we start making merch, it's gonna be on there.
Okay. So today we have age gaps, and I think my official title for that was problematic or swoon-worthy. And this topic is definitely going to get a little bit heated, as I know myself and Ellie have very different takes on age gaps.
Yeah,
so
I tend to favor them, and you tend to be wrong.
Oh, is that we're really going right off the bat, just
Right off the bat.
swinging? Okay, fair.
See, even Siri disagrees with you.
Also, was Siri a dude on your phone there?
Yeah. It's the British default. We have a British male default Siri, and I just didn't change him.
Well, that's not correct. That's
Well,
wrong.
That is British.
All of the above.
Wow, we're just fighting this episode constantly.
I mean, this is the episode that's gonna test our friendship. It's like going to IKEA for relationships. This is the IKEA of our podcast.
I feel like we should give some background into how we know each other. Because, I mean, an American and a Brit with a 10-year age gap don't really scream, common friendships.
That's right. You have to tell the embarrassing truth of how we've met.
Okay, I used to be a fan fiction writer for Orphan Black. And, Cosima and Delphine, love them to pieces. I used to write stories for them on Archive of Our Own. And Nisa read a couple of them.
Oh, I've read all of your work.
Oh god, that's awful. Some of them are atrocious.
All of your work.
Oh, I wrote some of them when I was like 16. I don't want to think about some of them. Oh god. Anyway, Lisa read a couple of them, and then we started emailing, and then we started WhatsApping, and we became friends. That's how our friendship began, and this episode is how our friendship is going to finish.
It was a quick one.
It was.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive into it. So, I gotta ask, for you, what do you think constitutes an age gap? Like, how many years are we talking here to actually be considered age gap?
Oh, it's a tricky one. I feel like, okay, I have to relate this solely to Sapphic romance books, because in reality I think that the answer would be different. Because there don't typically tend to be Sapphic books where you have, say, an 18-year-old and a 28-year-old. At least not that I can think of. Or maybe, would you consider like an 18-year-old and maybe a 25-year-old as an age gap?
Yes, 100%. That's a baby.
See, that's what I mean. That's only what, like, how many is that?
Seven. Yep.
Okay, so then if we're saying like a 16-year-old and a 21-year-old.
Okay, you're gonna have to remember that I am an American and the age of consent is not that low.
Oh god, what's your age of consent?
18 predominantly.
So age of consent is 16 in my country, but 18 in yours.
Okay, we'll pretend like 16 is okay for right now.
I'm not saying it is. My government is.
Well, your government is problematic as hell. That is a child.
So do not even start talking about governments with me.
A lot of boring math later.
So an 18-year-old and a 25-year-old is too big of an age gap.
Yes.
Is that because you're thinking an 18-year-old is too young?
So, I mean, if we're looking at when I start thinking about problematic age gaps, I often don't think about it in years. Because I think there is some gray area to that. Like if you're thinking about like a 32-year-old and a 39-year-old, that's 7 years, and I wouldn't think that was problematic. But like you said, an 18-year-old and 25-year-old, I would. And so the way I look at it is it becomes problematic when there is probably a drastic difference in life experience, because like at 18 you haven't really experienced a lot of the world, but at 25 still haven't experienced like as much as say a 37-year-old, but way more than an 18-year-old because you've been out and established. So I really think it comes down to like almost life stage.
Yeah, okay, so I think we can both agree on that in terms of an age gap isn't necessarily defined by age, but maybe life experience.
I could see that, yeah. I'd say that's probably true. But I also find a lot of age gaps problematic, so that's why we're gonna have an argument here.
There's clearly one of my favourite books that you want to destroy.
I'm not destroying any books, okay? We're talking about whether or not an age gap is problematic, and a few examples where clearly one of us thinks it's not, clearly the other does. So I guess just right off the bat to set the stage for what I think is problematic. If you are in a different life stage than the person that you are dating, if there is a drastic maturity level difference, and power dynamics, I think plays a large part in what is problematic versus what is swoon-worthy. Because I do think there are some swoon-worthy age gap stories out there, but that's kind of how I view it. So I guess, where are you coming from on your thoughts on age gaps? Because we clearly have very different opinions on them.
No, I do completely agree with you in the sense that I've seen some that work really well and some that don't work as well. And for me, it does come down to predominantly power balance and power dynamics, and also maturity levels. And I think that's where my two gauges lie in what makes a good one versus a bad one.
I can agree with that. I can agree. Okay, so I know that we're going to be talking a lot about a specific author, I think, in particular. Shout out to, I'm going to massacre the name, J.J. Arias? Arias?
I would have said Arias, but I imagine it is Arias.
I'm not sure.
We all know who we're talking about, the queen
exactly
of age gaps.
Oh, yeah. I feel like, I don't know if I've read a lot of her books that aren't age gap stories. I don't think Body Check was an age gap, but I can't quite remember. Which, shout out to JJ and Body Check. Hashtag love that. Okay, back to the age gaps, because I know you are going to talk about it, but let's hear it. What are your favorite age gap stories? And I know one of them in particular is going to probably kick this friendship ruiner off.
Okay, my favorite age gap books are Destination You and Crossing the Line by J.J. Arias.
Ooh.
No, do not tell me you don't like one of them. No, okay, I'm finishing my list. Informed Consent.
Ooh, I haven't heard of that one. Who's that by?
Have you not? Rachel. Again, it's a pronunciation thing. I'm going to get it wrong. I want to say Spangler.
Yep. Rachel Spangler.
Yes, Rachel Spangler, Informed Consent.
I know she exists.
You've read one, Modern English.
I do enjoy Modern English.
Informed Consent, you would love. We're going to discuss this later because you're going to enjoy this.
I mean, I'm in between books right now, so it can be my next one.
Okay. And Something's Different and The Love Factor, both by Quinn Ivins. So they are my top age gap differences. And I do have a little note on my list here. Interestingly, all of the women are in academics.
And that's why I have a problem with some of them.
Oh my god, I really thought you were going to say. You're going to say Crossing the Line, aren't you?
I am in a big way going to talk about Crossing the Line, because throwing this out there on my bad list, or the ones that I thought were problematic, not bad. I want to preface this by saying I do like a lot of these books. I just think the relationship specifically for me didn't hit quite right. So for the ones that I thought didn't hit quite right, I have These Thin Lines, with Kiera Conti, just is the worst. And then Gold, Crossing the Line, Breaking Character, Music in the Mirror, and Something's Different. So 2 of your favorites are on my problematic list. Hey, but shout out on one that I thought was really effective. I do have Destination You. And then one that I didn't hear on your list, and I do want to throw this one out there. I did find this while looking for masculine representation for that episode. Stud Like Her by Fiona, I think it's Zeddy, Zed, it's Zeddde, Fiona. I thought that was a really, really good representation of an age gap romance. But yes, I can tell by the look on your face that you are feeling some type of way about me putting two of your favorites on my list for being problematic.
I just have one question.
Okay.
Why? Okay, go ahead. Why is Crossing the Line, let's start there, on your list?
Okay. So Crossing the Line, to kind of give like a summary, is two women end up having a one-night stand, or so they think it is. And then one is a judge, just starting officially as a judge, and the other is a law student, and she's doing an internship. And she finds out that she is interning for the judge that she had the one-night stand with. And that's where our story starts and where it goes. And so for me, I think that's really problematic, not because of the one-night stand, but because they didn't disclose it. Once she did start the internship, Sierra did look into if there was possibilities, and so did the judge, to see if there was any way that they could switch who the intern was, but they had to give a reason, which goes to, again, disclosure. And I get it, like, you don't want to out yourself, and with how, especially since this does take place in America, especially with how we love trying to roll back those protections for gay people, you know, I get not wanting to disclose or being afraid how this will affect, you know, your career moving forward, especially since she's just a new judge. But that to me just hits so many red flags about it, because they know it was wrong, that they're still, like, they had this personal relationship and that they're going to continue with this internship. Both of them acknowledge that it should be discussed. And so I know also that they tried not to get involved until the end of the internship, so that it didn't really affect the internship or how it was. But let's be real, like, throughout the whole story, they very clearly are falling for each other, whilst one is honestly is Sierra's boss. Like, it is very much an intern working for the woman that she's into. And I'm going to throw this one out there. We, in America, like, just tore apart a very high public official for sleeping with an intern. So, I mean, I just think it's, I went there, yes. I'm just saying, that's so problematic. How is that not an issue for you?
I hear you. I respect you. But I don't see it as an issue for several reasons. They never had a sexual relationship whilst Jordan was Sierra's boss.
There was a scene where they did kind of push that line very early when Jordan was trying to avoid her and Sierra waited, basically, which is kind of predatory. I'm just going to throw that one out there. Like, your boss is trying to distance herself from you and you're going to wait so that you can confront her. Like, come on.
Okay, but are we counting a kiss as something sexual?
I mean, the way they did it, yes. I mean, if I give my kid a kiss on the cheek, no, not sexual. The way those two were kissing, 100% that was sexual. Tell me that wasn't sexual.
Yeah, no, okay, maybe it was a little bit. I just think that it was a really mature way that they handled that dynamic. Overall, that altercation aside, Jordan knew she couldn't be with Sierra because she was her boss. And she set that boundary from the get-go. I'm not saying Sierra always followed through, but that boundary was a hard set boundary. And yes, they couldn't get a new intern mentor because they didn't want to out themselves and come out. And so I get that completely. Especially for women in law, that must be an incredibly hard area to, I mean, it's hard for all women in most sectors, but I imagine specifically in academia, it must be tricky. And they didn't actually start their romance until after Sierra was no longer Jordan's mentee and had actually left the department.
Yeah, I guess I can give you that, but
It's just like, for me, it was like meeting somebody at work and falling for somebody at work, but then you only act on your feelings once you've left the company.
but they didn't wait until...
I'm not counting that kiss.
You have to count the kiss. It counts.
That was a little indiscretion, a little, and that was it.
Oh, a little indiscretion. And that's completely proper and doesn't play into power dynamics at all.
Given the fact it was Sierra that initiated it, and it was Jordan that stopped it, I'm going to say no, that's not an issue.
I mean, but it's still sexual harassment if you're going to be really,
If I'm going to be
technical
really
about
proper.
it. Yeah, if we're going to be proper about it. Because as you had said, Jordan set a boundary. Sierra did not respect it.
Yeah, but see, then that's not an issue with power dynamics. That's an issue with boundary
True.
crossing.
I mean, we can also call it boundary crossing. I just have a lot of problems with their...
I think that they did everything they could to mitigate the circumstances that were going to make it an unequal relationship.
Except for the fact that they could have requested she have a different internship. And, gonna throw this one out there, it did become problematic because there is one scene where Sierra goes into the courtroom of Jordan's ex and like awkwardly kind of confronts her, but not. Like, that was a little problematic. Okay, so I do want to preface by saying I do like crossing the line. Like, I don't think there's a J.J. Arias book that I have read that I don't like. I just think it still, for me, I have a problem with that age gap. And I think it plays more to the fact that there were ways that they could have avoided it. Hell, they could have been together much sooner if they would have just requested a different intern swap.
See, then it goes back to the whole thing about having to out yourself.
Okay, so in your opinion, is keeping your sexuality under wraps enough of a justification for hiding a prior relationship?
I think if I didn't work in the industry I worked in and I knew I would potentially be discriminated against for being out, then yes.
Okay, fair. I guess being a woman in a male-dominated field, and having worked in some really toxic work environments down south, I can see that wanting to hide your sexuality and kind of keep it under wraps being justifiable. I will admit that. I still don't love that relationship. It's not the one I find most problematic, but it is one on the list of ones that I just did not love.
Okay, what's one you find most problematic?
These thin lines. Kiera Conti, I think that's her name. She is the worst. I hate her.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
totally hated her.
I need to remind myself of my Goodreads review.
It was Kiera Conti. It was the fashion world where she was a designer, and it was like a Cinderella thing where literally
I remember her shoe coming off in the lobby or something.
exactly. I think it's Vi. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's Vi. V.
One of them.
Okay. So she literally has her shoe fall off when she's coming in for this, again, internship. Why are we fucking our interns?
Well,
we shouldn't be. And this is why. But no, so the big thing here is Kiera is married. So she is the designer for this huge design firm, and her wife is like the figurehead for the most part, and gets a lot of credit for the designs that aren't necessarily hers. That's a whole other thing, because her and her wife, I will agree, have an extremely toxic relationship, and this is where I will say it is toxic. They are not good for each other. They shouldn't be together. Nonetheless, they still are married. So here's my problem with this story is Kiera still acts like she loves her wife. She still is affectionate with her wife. Like, apart from the toxicity, she still is committed to that relationship. When V starts having feelings for her and making it clear, she doesn't shut it down. She doesn't set a boundary. She doesn't, like, say, hey, we can't do this. I'm married. She doesn't say anything. And V is younger, impressionable. She has her own backstory where she's looking for love, because her family is, I mean, it's literally Cinderella. She has evil stepmother and stepsisters, like. So she is looking for that figure, that older figure, honestly, if I'm being real, to love her. And so she does latch on to Kiera in a way that I think is pretty unhealthy. But on top of that, Kiera kind of condones it and plays into it. She's calling V her muse and trying to make her feel special. And there's even some really tense moments where, like, you can feel the sexual, like, charge between them and the tension. And age gap apart, like, they're both technically adult women, so both consenting. You do have that dynamic of this really can't go any further than sex, because Kiera is married, and she doesn't seem like she is in a place where she would end that marriage. So you have this woman who, she's rich, she's powerful in this industry, like, she's a boss bitch, honestly. But her and her wife are a power couple, and they're people that V look up to. So you have this, like, hero worship, and she kind of is utilizing that hero worship in their relationship. Like, if there wasn't that hero worship, I don't know if that would have been going anywhere. And it's one of those where Kiera can acknowledge, and does acknowledge at some point, that, like, V only wants somebody to love her. And she's dangling this in front of her, like, hey, I do have these feelings for you also. But she has no intention of leaving her wife. Like, eventually they do break up, but it's like years later. Well, it's not years later, but it's years into, like, their marriage, and it's years in the making, and it's only because she is faced with the undeniable proof that her wife is cheating on her.
Yes.
It's not something that she says, hey, I'm not in love with you, or hey, like, I know you cheat on me, but I haven't been faced with it for real. It's only when it's super public and she can't ignore it anymore that she does divorce her wife, or plans to. But she doesn't even wait for the divorce to go through to sleep with V.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Do they sleep together and then there's, like, a long break?
Yes, that is how it happens, is there's a long break in between. So I have less of an issue with the age gap when finally, like, years pass and they get back together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still problematic because of how it began, and the fact that still V hasn't done the work on herself to get out of that mentality of needing that external validation and love from an older female in her life. And I hate to say, like, there's, you know, the, like, predatory lesbian, quote unquote, like, stereotype out there. I hate to use that because I think it's horseshit. But in the context of that story, it does feel a little bit predatory.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I think especially because I wasn't necessarily looking at it from a romance perspective. I do think she was looking for someone to fill that family void that she had.
Exactly. And she felt like she was accepted. And, I mean, Kiera did make her feel special. She called her muse. Like, she made a whole line based on this woman. Like,
Yeah, who
if
wouldn't
I'm
love that?
exactly, if I'm young and impressionable and like this huge fashion icon is telling me that I'm her muse and makes this whole line based on me, fuck. Like, okay,
Yeah,
like
okay.
I would be okay with that. Even if it's not right for me, I would be open to that. But
Yeah, I do think, no, I can see your point that from that perspective it is problematic.
yeah. And so I think that's the issue on that one. So I think that's probably the worst I've seen as far as representations go within Sapphic literature.
God, I've got some you would hate. There's some I haven't even recommended to you because I'm like, no.
You're like, I already know you would hate it, so let's not do this to ourselves or our friendship.
Let me go to my bad representation list of Sapphic.
Okay, let's hear yours.
I have only 3. One we've discussed in our previous episode, which is Truth and Measure. Again, I've spoken about that at length previously. It comes down to the fact that I think it was an abusive relationship. My second one is, and I begrudgingly say this because I love the author and I love their other work, but Saving Mia did not do it for me. I think I remember telling you about this. Essentially, It's about, I want to say she's 18. An 18-year-old girl, yeah, already red flag. Basically, she needs the money. And she decides to auction off her virginity.
I'm sorry.
And so this older businesswoman decides that she's going to, quote, save her by buying her virginity herself. And instead of maybe just saying, you know what, Mia, I'm going to buy your virginity for appearance sake. Do not sleep with me. I do not want to sleep with you. Here's the money you need because clearly you need help.
No, does she actually sleep with her?
Oh, yes, Nisa, she does.
No.
And not only does she sleep with her, she's a dominatrix that makes her submissive.
No, time out. Nisa needs a break. No.
Oh my god, it gets so much worse.
Oh, fuck's sake. How does it get worse from that?
So, you know, typically sub-dom dynamics, you are expected to call your mistress in the safe space of a bedroom. The woman, I can't even remember what her name is, she wants a sub in every area of her life. So Mia has to call her mistress. So like the older woman will come home and she'll like make her dinner and say, oh mistress, how was your day?
You broke my brain.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier, hero worship. This woman has given her an obscene amount of money that she clearly needed, and then she's like saved her, quote.
I think you broke my brain.
Yeah. I did not enjoy that one bit.
I can't even begin to unpack all the ways that is wrong. Oh, that woman is old enough to be her mother.
And she tied her to a table.
No,
Yes.
no, stop.
Face down on the coffee table.
Why do you keep making it worse?
I do, you should read it.
I'm not going to read that for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
That was the worst example of an age gap I read.
How? And
I think I've broken you.
You did. You broke me. I'm so appalled on so many different levels that I don't even know where to begin on that relationship. Because it starts with prostitution.
Yeah, and I forgot that there's a little caveat in there that in order for the woman, Cassandra, she's the CEO, of course she is, she makes Mia live with her for 30 days in order to receive the money she needs.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, Cassandra basically says, you're mine for 30 days.
That's Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, and at the end of the 30 days, I will give you the money for whatever it is you need it for.
You win for the competition. Yes,
Thank you.
Oh my god. You win. You have broken my brain in ways that I can't understand because there are so many things wrong with everything you just said that I think talking about it even would just derail this entire podcast. I'm gonna write an angry letter. I don't know.
Who do I send it to? But this is what I mean. I loved the authors. I think I've read maybe 5 of the authors' books.
Oh my god.
And I really liked one of them. I'm pretty sure I gave it...
Was it her debut, like,
No.
book? Oh no.
It's
oh,
quite
no.
a recent one, I think.
Oh.
Some of them, especially I feel like when you get onto the whole dominatrix BDSM arena, it gets trickier to...
I mean, and just from, like, a standpoint of if everything else was above board, I feel like that BDSM, like, is really tough for people to write because there is embedded into it a power dynamic.
Yeah, of course. I think that's where the aftercare comes into it.
But yes, exactly. But I mean, that age gap, hell, I have a problem with the age gap. 100% just alone because that's a child. And I mean, and story there, that's a child. But everything else, like from the prostitution of it all, is just problematic for the simple fact that that is a vulnerable individual who's not really entering into this consensually. I would definitely say this feels like a gray area.
For sure.
It's dubious consent at minimum because she is vulnerable. She needs this money, and it's not necessarily something that she's truly consenting to.
I saw one review that was basically like, somebody had reviewed it and said, this story's icky to me, I don't like it. And someone commented and was like, well, she agreed to it.
No, but she didn't. And that's where I think dubcon, or dubious consent, for anybody who doesn't know what it is, really comes into play. So kind of, trigger warning. I feel like we'll need one of those for this episode since we do kind of talk about it. But for anybody who doesn't know what dubious consent is, it is where one person in the relationship consents, but not in a way that really it feels non-consensual. It's like non-consensual consent. So one of the biggest ones I've seen as an example is like marital consent, where like, yes, you're agreeing to sex and not saying no, but you don't really want to, or there's something that's holding you back, or in this case prostitution, where yes, consent is given, but it's one of those where if circumstances were different, you would not be giving that consent.
Yeah, because like I didn't know what it meant. We had this discussion the other day. I had no idea what it meant. And the way you described it to me was you consent without having all the information you would need to make your decision.
Yeah, and that's also a part of it is uninformed consent. So like, I hate to bring up again another like really terrible term, but like stealthing, which is now starting to actually in some countries be considered rape, or non-consensual sex. Well, rape, not non-consensual sex. But like, if somebody would have known that they weren't actually wearing their condom, there would be no consent. So, unfortunately, my country is not really viewing that as rape. So that would kind of be where that line of dubious consent is. So in a lot of contexts, whether it's you're thinking about it legally, maybe it's legally above board, but ethically, morally, it is not above board.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that for me actually is probably the most problematic portion of what you had just told me, is the dubcon of it all, that she is in a really bad situation where she desperately needs money. She has no experience whatsoever, so she doesn't even have like a barometer for what is proper, what is healthy. And she's being asked to do these things by somebody who is literally holding money over her. And so she is consenting, but not in a way that is at all informed. Like, if she had money, I don't think that book would have even happened. Like, there would not have been consent to that act. So I think that's probably, even from what you just said, the most problematic portion of that.
Yeah, it was not a great example of an age gap romance.
No, that doesn't play as a romance to me. That plays as a cautionary tale.
I do remember reading it and thinking, like, how has it got so many 5-star reviews? I think it's interesting when you see that kind of thing on, especially on Goodreads, which, you know, is a platform most of us use to review our books. Seeing some people give 5 stars versus 1 star and the reasons they give, it's fascinating to me.
I feel like I could tear that apart from all sorts of different angles, even the BDSM one, just because that's not a good representation of BDSM, because BDSM is all about consent, and setting boundaries and making sure that everybody is on board with everything that's going to happen, and that, like, obviously in the bedroom aside, that there is more equal footing as far as power dynamics. Like, obviously within the confines there is that little bit of power dynamic, that's obviously what you're looking for a bit, but within the context of the relationship, everybody should be on even footing.
Yeah, for sure. And that book just did not have it.
Oof,
Indeed.
And you said it has good reviews on Goodreads?
It does. It has really good reviews on Goodreads. It is currently rated at 4.16 out of 1,259 ratings.
That's distressing for me, and I think even hearing something like that also kind of makes me wonder about the state of sapphic romance or sapphic literature. Even because when you think about this, like, I feel like something like this in the context of heterosexual writing would be buried so deep that nobody would really read it, because there are so many options for heterosexual romances out there. But within the confines of sapphic literature, obviously we're getting more out there, but we're still at that point where it's not hit mainstream, and so it is harder to find, and we accept a lot of work that I feel like we wouldn't ordinarily accept, just because, hey, well, at least it's representation. I feel like, especially in something like that, we have to question whether all representation is good representation. Because in a vacuum, if somebody like an evangelical picked that up and read that book, that just went and proved everything wrong that, like, they think.
Yeah. I would argue that all representation is indeed not good representation.
Exactly. And I get it. Like, with authors, you write the stories that you want to see, but also there are people who will enjoy, like, everything that's out there. I hate to say it. Like, it's, what is it, rule 42? Rule 72? There's a rule that if you can think about it, it's on the internet somewhere. So I think for that's almost one of those rules where if you can write about it, there will be somebody out there who enjoys it. But I question whether or not something like that, how that affects, like, our community as a whole and how people view, like, sapphics.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could also argue on the flip side, not that I necessarily think it, but you could argue that people that are going to read that book are only people that are interested in power imbalances, BDSM. But then again, I read it and I love an age gap, and I'm kind of impartial to BDSM books. If they've got good reviews, I read them. If they don't, I won't.
And that's kind of my point, is, like, given a wider variety or a wider availability of sapphic books, do you think that would have even been something that would have been recommended to you? Like, no. If people could say that there were loads more in the BDSM arena that aren't problematic, like, that's where I question, like, are we just at that place right now where we don't have enough, like, variety out there, that we are settling for things that we shouldn't settle for?
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of authors do get pigeonholed, and so if you can think of a trope, no doubt you will think of an author.
Like Lee Winters and Ice Queens, or J.J. Arias and Age Gap.
Yeah, and this author and BDSM, they only write BDSM, this author.
Yeah, I don't know. That's It's interesting to think about. I know we went dark there. I blame it on you, but
Excuse you. You asked me what my worst age gap was.
don't be so good at the topic that is given to you. I have to say, since we got that dark, I don't want to end us on a dark note. So let's go back to some of the ones we like.
Yeah. Tell me what, because I read out my list. What are the ones you like?
So I had mentioned Destination You like you had, and then I had said again Stud Like Her. So I do want to kind of drop a mention for that because we will be talking about it again with mass representation and their relationships. But I thought it was a really good book for age gap relationships. Kind of the summary of that is we have Chance, who is a stud in her mid-30s approximately, and she is coming to terms with the fact that she does have more attraction to more masculine women or other studs like her. And so there is a whole stigma in her community regarding studs and being interested in other studs. The thought being that, you know, a more masculine presenting lesbian needs to be with a feminine presenting lesbian. So this is something that's kind of taken her out of the dating world for a while. She had been in an abusive relationship with her partner for quite some time, trying to just live into the stereotype, but she's out of that. She's kind of trying to put her life back together after they break up, and she's not really thinking about dating. But she wants to kind of go back to a woman that she had dated previous to her relationship, who also is older than her. She's a professor. And so she enters into this woman's office trying to look for her to see almost like if they could get back together, or maybe she could try and recapture what she lost in her younger years when she had left that relationship, when she wasn't as secure with a masculine relationship. And she meets Garrett, who is early to mid 20s. And from the get-go, like, she doesn't really have, like, she's attracted to Garrett, but she's not really looking for that type of relationship. And she kind of tries to make it a little bit clear to Garrett early on, because Garrett is very, very persistent in her pursuit of Chance. I think the thing that I like about it, even though they do have that 10-year age gap, though, or decade age gap, is that in it, you see that actually Chance is the one who is less comfortable in who she is and who she's attracted to than Garrett. And so it's actually Garrett who's kind of pulling her out of her shell and trying to show her that, like, hey, it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to want who you want. And she even points out that, like, there's already so much issue being a lesbian and being accepted by society. We shouldn't be putting more onto ourselves within our own communities to try and be somebody that we're not, or try and present a certain way. But also, in the background, you find that Chance, while she is in this point in her life where she has, like, her own house, she has, you know, professional friends, she is very well established in her career. We find out that Garrett is an Instagram influencer. And so she has a huge following. She has all these sponsorships. She actually, if you think about it from, like, a monetary perspective, she actually makes more than Chance does. And so financially, they're on even keel. Thinking about, like, their career, like, Garrett's already at that point where she's thinking about, well, what do I do after retirement? Like, she's already at that point in her life. So she has her own place. She has her own friends. She is very confident in who she is. And so I think that was a really good age gap story there from that context, just because they are very much on an even footing, despite the fact that they are, like, they have that gap. And actually, when you look at it, Garrett is kind of getting to that point where she's already gone through, like, her fun clubbing times, and while all her friends are still in it, she's like, I kind of just want to settle down. Like, I enjoy going home and drinking a wine, and, like, all this stuff I do for social media, like, is already getting kind of tiring. I think, again, looking, like I had said, the thing for me is, are they at the same life stage? I feel like they are at that same life stage. And so it really is a good age gap relationship.
Yeah, I think that's why I liked Destination U, and I'm assuming you did too.
Yes.
Although there was that big age gap, Taylor was very much, I've travelled all over the world, I have a job that lets me work remotely, like, I know what I want in life, and I want to settle down somewhere remote with you and be happy.
Exactly. I didn't really have a problem with that because, like, even though Raquel was Taylor's teacher in high school and Taylor was like hard crushing on the teacher, they met years after that relationship. And so I don't think it's any issue there. I really enjoyed that. JJ really does do a lot of good age gap relationships, you know. My thoughts on Crossing the Line aside, I did enjoy that book. I'm gonna throw it out there. I still enjoyed it, despite the fact that I thought the relationship was a little problematic, but I enjoyed it. Like, JJ really does create great stories that highlight whole people, I feel like.
Yeah, she's definitely like top tier author for me. Like, I will read anything JJ writes.
Oh, 100%.
And if it's an age gap, even better. I love a sensible age gap.
Yes. I love an age gap where I can understand why the older person in the relationship would be interested in pursuing a younger woman. I think that's where a lot of our difference of opinion comes from, is because with our age gap ourselves, I tend to be closer to the age of the older love interest, and you tend to be closer to the age of the younger love interest. And so, obviously, like, pursuing an older woman, like, hey, what's wrong with that? She's more mature. She's probably, you know, might be more established in life. I get it, but that's where I question, like, I hate to say the adults, the older love interests. Some of these, going back to Crossing the Line, Sierra is still a student. She has not established her career. She is just starting out. Like, why are we pursuing people who are not at that same stage in life that you are? Like, Sierra is still, when we meet her, she is still having one night stands, clubbing, taking ladies up, like, to remote rooftops in clubs, and like that's her shtick. Like, her friends even kind of get onto her, like, a little bit, like, she's kind of a fuckboy a little bit, like, and we're gonna pursue her.
Yeah. I will admit, I think I loved her so much because of the journey she went on. I didn't love her at the start of the book because she was a fuckboy, as you said.
Yes.
But I think that getting her, I don't know what you'd call it in the States, your, like, law degree?
Yeah, she passed the bar.
Yeah. So I think that her getting that, and then her deciding that, you know, she was going to get her own apartment, really matured her for me.
Again, that's just where I'm thinking about it from, like, if you are that 30-something, like, Sierra's still clubbing, she's still living with roommates, like, she hasn't been a big girl, in a sense, for very long. Like, she's, by the end, I will give that, and that's why I still love the book. By the end, she does mature, she does establish herself, she gets her law degree. When it does come up that they're both in court and they had that situation, they did disclose the conflict of interest that, hey, I was her intern. So, like, putting it out there, I think that's where I say I like where they ended, but I don't understand how you use it as the launch point.
Okay, I get that. What was the other one you said that you didn't love, but that was on my love list? Was it a Quinn one?
Something's different.
I loved that book.
Another one where it was a secretary, assistant, personal assistant, and a professor, like her boss.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that one especially, like, I mean, there's all sorts of different tropes playing into that one that make it kind of a problematic relationship as it is, just because it starts on a very large lie. But again, it's one of those where it has that power imbalance. Even though the assistant isn't really the assistant, I feel like that's how it gets a pass, is because the assistant isn't really the assistant. Did you want to give an overview of kind of quick summary for those who haven't read Something's Different?
Essentially, there's two twin women, and one of them decides she wants to go traveling or something to be with her boyfriend, and she can't get the time off work. So she convinces her twin to cover her at work, working as an administrative assistant or something along those lines for a professor at a university. The professor doesn't know that the administrative assistant is in fact the twin and not the person she hired. And then the twin basically starts helping her with her work, and the professor realizes that actually she's really intelligent, she knows a lot about the work we do here, so they start to work closer with one another, and feelings develop, and a romance happens, and it's wonderful, and I love it.
I do want to preface by saying I did enjoy this book. I thought their relationship was adorable, and it does get a little bit of a pass because it's not really her assistant. However, she doesn't know that.
Okay, but are you arguing that it begins wrong because she's her assistant or because of the age gap?
I mean, I feel like they kind of tie into it, though, is because with the age gap, I think we agreed that the thing that can make it problematic is a power imbalance. And there is a power imbalance in a manager and an assistant. Like, this is her boss in a big-ass way.
I think it's just the way it's handled. I mean, people meet their husbands, wives, whatever, at work all the time. And I think it comes down to how the boss uses their power within the dynamics of their relationship. I think their feelings developed outside of their professional relationship.
I don't think it developed outside of their professional relationship, because one of the big things that, what is the professor's name?
And the professor is Ruth.
Yeah, Ruth. Old woman's name, just gonna throw that one out there.
My middle name's Ruth.
No, it is not. Shut
No, it's not.
up. Don't try and play me like that. But no, Ruth, that's the thing, is like, because Ruth makes the comment that part of the reason why she feels this kinship to her is because she feels like everybody is against her, and now her assistant is going that extra mile, is giving her that extra like push to try and be able to. She's the dean. That's what it was. She's the dean of the university. She's the new dean. And people don't like the administrative things. So that's the thing, is like, she feels like she is on an island alone. And the only reason some of her arguments are being able to stick is because her assistant is staying and giving her extra like work and putting in that extra effort. So the reason she even notices her in the first place is because she goes from not really caring to now she's giving me these great reports about what I'm trying to push out. So it's all about the work that she is doing. And actually, it's kind of a weird dynamic too for the age gap, the power imbalance thing, because if you think about it, it's like a sub-story to the romance where Ruth is trying to encourage her to go back to school. Like, I hate to say that she does view that administrative job as beneath Caitlin. Like, so she almost acknowledges that they aren't on equal footing because she doesn't even think an assistant is almost a job worth having. And I feel like that's a little judgmental, but again, it's indicative of the fact that she is a younger woman who's starting out in her career, and Ruth is so accomplished. I think you can't ignore the fact that there is a maturity level from at least Ruth's perspective, because she assumes that Caitlin is obviously her sister, you know, with the whole twin thing.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem for me was the lie, not necessarily the age.
Yeah. I think if you look at it with all the information given so that you're informed on what is happening, if you look at it is Caitlin is a very young woman starting out in academia, like trying to make a name for herself, trying to get into academia. And with Ruth being a president of a university, like, she would be somebody who would be hiring. And I know that that's not the direction it takes, and that's why I give it a pass and still genuinely enjoy the book. But I think it is worth mentioning, like, Caitlin could very well utilize their relationship and her relationship with Ruth to garner favor, to get jobs in the future. So I feel like that for me is kind of where it's a little gray. It's not one of the ones I hate the most, but it really straddles that line for me.
Okay. Interesting.
All that said, I do enjoy it, obviously. I like the twin swap trope. That's always a great trope. Not a great relationship start. Yeah, Orphan Black.
Although I will give it credit to Caitlin, she never kissed Ruth under the pretense of being her twin Chloe. She came clean before anything physical happened.
That is true. And that's where I say, like, I wouldn't say it's the worst offender. Obviously, because you found the worst offender in that horrible, horrible book that you presented with me. That's gonna forever break my brain.
I really want you to read it now.
I might, just to be upset, but you're gonna have to deal with my running commentary of how much I hate it.
That's fine. I feel like I deal with your running commentary daily about books.
This is true. This is true. And that's why we are partners, but not in a gay way.
So, to summarize this episode, JJ Arias, queen of age gaps.
100%. I will give you that. I mean, she's just a phenomenal author as it is, but... And I still do want to give a shout out to Stud Like Her. The book itself, I had a few areas that weren't 100% to my liking, but if you want to see a really healthy age gap, I think Stud Like Her is a really good depiction of a healthy age gap.
And if you want to see a mature one, I would say Quinn Ivins.
I think I prefer not Something's Different. What was the other one that we really enjoyed?
Love Factor.
The Love Factor. I will give props to The Love Factor. That was also a really good one.
Yeah. And if you are an author, please, if you choose to write an age gap, don't make it abusive or coercive or with a massive power imbalance.
Preach.
That's all I want from an age gap, is for there not to be those issues.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I think that's where we're gonna end the show. So for everybody listening, thanks for listening. Definitely check us out next week and hit the like, hit the subscribe, do all the social media things that we need you to do. We are on Instagram at the Sapphic Gays Podcast. And yeah, have a good day, everybody.